morning, everyone.
Hi, good morning, Shawn.
How are you, Robin?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here with you.
Awesome. We're going to let people join in here. And while people are joining in, just want to give a couple reminders this morning that we are on Facebook Live. So if you want to watch us there as well. And additionally, there is a one-pager. If you go to the Disruptor League, to the Disruptor Connection website, there is the one-pager that our team has been working with Robin on that will be great time of reflection. And as we even go through the conversation this morning, we'll have that available for you guys. Remember that this is also being recorded and that we have a chat function. So you can, I see a whole lot of people already chiming in. Leslie from Johannesburg, South Africa.
Oh, cool.
That is so awesome to have you with us here. And additionally, the Q&A portion is open. I will be watching questions and answers through this whole time as we go through this morning. And it is such an honor to be talking about healing the divide and designing for a just world with Robin Beers. Robin and I have become friends for the past couple of years just through the industry, and now become really great friends. And really excited to have this discussion with Robin today. Again, if you haven't downloaded the one-pager, go do that. We have the chat function and the Q&A, but we're going to actually start today a little different. Before we jump into this immense discussion, and Robin and I have got so much planned for today, but it will definitely, this could probably be 2 or 3 of these sessions. But today is also a holiday that we want to recognize as Juneteenth. And I want to read something that Robin wrote that is so powerful before we jump into this discussion around healing the divide. But so Juneteenth, also known as Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, and Celebration Day, is an American holiday celebrated on June 19th. It memorializes June 19th, 1865, when Union General Gordon Granger read orders in Galveston, Texas, that all previously enslaved people in Texas were free. The 1865 date is largely symbolic. The Emancipation Proclamation issued by President Abraham Lincoln had legally freed slaves in Texas on January 1st, 1863, almost 2.5 years earlier. Even after the journal ordered, some slave masters withheld the information from their slaves, holding them as slaves through one more harvest season. Although Juneteenth is not a federal holiday yet, most states and the District of Columbia have passed legislation recognizing it as a holiday or observance. So before we get started with our conversation, Robin, I want us to center ourselves on the intention that we seek to catalyze healing and transformation within us and between us through courageous, compassionate dialogue. So this conversation centers our 2 voices, a white female voice and a white Native American voice, for the purpose of creating awareness and encouraging action to dismantle systems of white supremacy, and is dedicated to the lives of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Rayshard Brooks, and many others who have come before them, named and unnamed. And Robin, when I reached out to you and said, can we have this conversation, you jumped all over it and you were like, yes, please. And I think what would be really great, Robin, is if in just a minute, you could actually share your personal background and why this is so passionate to you, not only from your education background, but from your personal background with your husband. If you just share a little bit with the audience around that, and then we'll dive into the whole designing for the just world.
Sounds good. Yeah, so I became very passionate about racial equality and issues of social justice as an undergrad at the University of Vermont, and decided to go deeper by pursuing a master's degree in African American studies. And I applied to several programs, and at the time, the whole Rodney King beating and those protests erupted. And so obviously I decided I had to go to UCLA. So that's what I did. And from there, I ended up doing a PhD in organizational psychology with a lot of emphasis on diversity and inclusion. So that's a strong part of my background. And inclusiveness has just been a part of how I lead. I head up design and insights for the B2B part of Wells Fargo. And yes, I'm married to an African-American man.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Robin, for sharing that. So let's just dive right into the conversation today. How can design impact social justice in your mind? How can that truly impact social justice?
Well, as Steve Jobs said, design is not just about how the thing looks, it's about how the thing works, right? So we need to unpack how systemic racism came to be and how it works, and start seeing the water that we swim in. So my favorite definition of design is from my coach and the founder of Sea Change Design Institute, Laura Lee Allen. And I'm going to read that quote to you. Design is the conscious planning and meaningful acts that create our relationship to ourselves and each other. So I think that's a really beautiful definition of design, and particularly when we're talking about systemic racism.
Yeah, I love that. And just again, I want to reiterate what you quoted there. Design is the conscious planning and meaningful acts that create our relationship to ourselves and each other. I have personally, I had not even thought of it that way in my past at all, Robin, until we started to dig in this. And so we're gonna also share some polls today as we're going through, and we're gonna get pretty personal, and we're probably gonna as I used to remember being as a child sitting in church, where you know the preacher would step on the toes a little bit. I think we might step on some toes today, right? And make some people uncomfortable as we talk about systemic racism and what's happening in our country today. So let's dive into this. In your opinion right now, Robin, how can design specifically impact racial injustice?
You know, when we think about racism as, well, I'm going to read you another definition. So this one is from this book, Ijeomo Aluo. So you want to talk about race. Racism is a prejudice against someone based on race when those prejudices are reinforced by a system of power. And so the system of power in the United States is what has been designed. And that is every institution, education, criminal law, justice, corporate America, our government, and our healthcare system. So every dimension of our society has been consciously planned, and meaningful actions have been put in place to make it function as it has over the course of our history. And a friend on LinkedIn posted, you know, racism in America is not a bug, it's a feature. You know, it was actively designed into the system. And it works at the societal, the organizational, and the individual level. But I like this definition as reinforced by system of power because it takes it out of, individual behaviors and acts and puts it into the context of these systems.
Yeah, so again, a great, and we've got lots of chat happening around, the quotes, and we will get all that to you. Some of these quotes are in the one pager if you haven't downloaded it, and we'll pull all of them together as we talk about that. And again, we have the Q&A section that I'm watching. So if you have questions for Robin and I, throw them in the Q&A. And we will answer those. So let's actually jump into a question that we're going to ask the group here, Robin, in a poll. And remember, if you're on Facebook Live with us, you can't answer these poll questions, but you can type in an answer. But I want to actually jump into the very first question we have, as we've been talking about racism and systemic. And the very first poll question we have is, I believe in people's right to protest against racial injustice. So I believe in people's right to protest against racial injustice. No. Yes, as long as it is not violent. Yes, and while I don't condone violence, I understand why it happens. And then yes. We are going to take a pause there because I think, again, there's a lot of opinions, right, Robin? And you live in, the San Francisco, the Bay Area, like these riots that have been happening, these protests have been happening. There's such, again, a spectrum of what people believe here. And so let's see if we got our answers coming up here with, it's going to pop up any moment now. So 53%, yes. And while I don't condone violence, I understand why it happens. And then 26%, yes, as long as it's not violence. So almost 80%, 100% really. And then some just said yes. Robin,
yeah, the yes is by any means necessary.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Whatever it is. And it's hard. I have an 11-year-old who has asked a lot of questions around why are people being violent? Why are people doing things? Mm-hmm. It's a hard place to really sit down and have a discussion around sometimes. But I think going into that next question, knowing where, we have 100% of the people who answered that poll said yes, right? Yeah. It is okay to protest against racial injustice. Now what I want to ask you, Robin, and I love this question, and the team worked with you on a bunch of this. How can design, especially what's happened as we look at what, Minneapolis is talking about, they voted to change the way law enforcement is done, right? How can design actually impact law enforcement? Reform it or design a better system? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if we think about design as problem solving, first the first thing that we need to do in the problem solving process is frame the question, frame the right problem. What problem are we trying to solve? Because that determines what actions you will take. And the police force in this country was established to control slaves. That's how it came to be in this country. We didn't have police in the colonies until there was a need to try to capture runaway enslaved people. So when you then trace the history of the police department and the whole school to prison pipeline, and the way prisoners are used as ancillary workforce, you really begin to see the racist structures that are designed into it. So I think looking at what is and the pain points, to use design terminology, experienced in the system that is, is a first step. And then the second step is, well, what kind of, future do we want to create? I think a lot of people get freaked out when we think about, dismantling the police system. I don't get freaked out about it because I think, unless you actually, tear it apart, you can't rebuild something that's new because it's still going to be based on this historic legacy that I think is, really apparent to everyone now. A colleague of mine said, I think we're having a Me Too moment about race now. But it becomes, if you can't redesign a good system on top of a bad system.
Yeah, that I just was writing the note when you just said that, a Me Too moment about race, right? So in this, the whole law enforcement is here. I have a brother who's a police officer. I have some family members, and I've had some really deep discussions with friends around, unfortunately what you said, many of how they've been trained is to lead with violence. But and again, we're not here to slam law enforcement. There are some great police officers. There's some great things and great men and women serving.
Again, we're not talking about individual people. Yeah. We're talking about system and training, how it's designed to work.
Yeah. And so I love what you said, and I hadn't thought about it this way too, Robin. Like, yeah, you just can't. I don't know that in the state that it is today that you can just take bits and pieces of it to redo it. You're going to have to really do a complete systemic change, which probably does mean a complete dismantle of how it's been set up to then build what's really needed for today.
Yeah. How might we design a law enforcement system that protects the safety of all people?
Yeah, and you started in the beginning there, and we're big passion around this is defining the right problem, right? And so many times we go even after the easy problems. And I don't think this is an easy problem, but defining that right problem to then go tackle in this. So one of the questions we got, and I would love, and we'll dig into this, but asking you, Robin, what are your thoughts on racial equity in the design field? Do you feel the design field is diverse today?
No, definitely not. And there's a couple links that we'll put into the chat. One is from an organization called Design as Protest. And they have on their site, and we'll put that link into a Google Doc, resources for decolonizing design. Design is definitely, like a lot of professions, been constructed from the white point of view, and particularly the white male point of view. And there's a great interview from a former colleague and dean of a design school in Toronto. Dory Tunstall is her name. We'll put that interview in the chat. And she is talking about how there's really a very, there's a lack of representation of Black designers within the field of advertising in particular. And when you think about advertising, there's been, a lot of racism and sexism in advertising. And so if there's no representation of, diverse perspectives, that persists, right? I mean, we can remember like that very tone deaf Pepsi commercial featuring one of the Kylie Jenner, one of those Kardashians, like holds up a Pepsi at a protest in front of police. Like, I can guarantee you there were no Black people in the room when that advertisement was designed, So
yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, Robin, what's next question here? What strengths does design bring to the table when tackling these systemic issues? So, When we start looking at tackling these big systemic issues, where does design and what strengths does design bring to the table?
Well, I think design methodology, based on, creating deep empathy for the people who are going to be affected by whatever intervention is designed, it is a core piece. I think, again, framing the right problem. And then, while the field of design has not been, fully representative and has inequality within it, I would say that the methods of design, and probably why I've become really attracted to using them in kind of all aspects of work and problem solving in life, is that they are designed to be democratic, right? So when we run design thinking workshops and such, we're trying to solicit and diverge and get as many ideas and perspectives as possible before we just hone in on like, oh, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to solve the problem. But I think, inherent in design too is wanting to look at issues holistically and from a systems perspective. And really, again, going back to that beautiful definition, it's about conscious planning before taking, meaningful steps of action.
Yeah, we talk a lot about within our ecosystem, radical relationships. And I absolutely believe that is more needed today than anything. Having diverse thought, diverse races, diverse beliefs at the table as we start to design new systems in our world. And we're having some great chat happening here. But a question for you, and then we'll jump into the second poll question, Robin, is how do you think banks and their products could be designed better to combat systemic racism?
Wow, you really sprung that on me. I heard that question. Yeah, this is not rehearsed, people. Yeah, I mean, I think there was an article that came out, a news story about, banking while Black. And it was specifically focused on how some people have felt when they're going through a fraud claim. So they've had, they've experienced, some sort of identity breach or security breach, and they've had fraud on their accounts. And then they have to engage with the bank to, we call it become whole again, get their money back. And it's been, the experience that was relayed in the article is that, a lot of times Black people feel like they are being questioned, that they're the ones having to prove that this was actually fraud and that this happened, and that they're not being treated with empathy. And yeah, they're under suspicion. So I think that you have to take these these journeys, going through a fraud reconciliation process is a customer journey, and say, okay, do our people have the skill set, or what are the underlying biases that may be occurring here? And do we have a code of conduct and a set of principles that enable every customer to be, treated with dignity, respect, equality? That's one example.
Yeah,
There's probably so many others.
Yeah, and I knew I was bringing that one on you, right? Like, and love the questions that are coming from the group. But I just experienced that with a friend of mine in Las Vegas, where he and his wife, he's a white Caucasian male, and she's a Black woman, and they had some fraud happen in their bank account, and they got scammed. And he said to me the amount of questions that she got asked versus when he called and got asked, it made him infuriated. And he called me, he's like, I just have to tell you what happened, right? And because I told him we were getting ready to do this session. And he's like, I just don't understand it. There's no difference, but yet there's a prime example in the system what's happening, right? And this just happened last week, like a week ago today, she experienced this. And so that's awesome. Wow, here is one that, and this is actually really a question. And then we'll do this next poll question. But what are your thoughts on traditional diversity and inclusion initiatives in the workplace?
I love that question. I think one of my friends, Rosie, is on the line, and I'm going to talk about her at the end. Don't let me forget. But her husband said that diversity and inclusion is corporate speak for thoughts and prayers. So, we have massive gun violence problem in this country, and most of the time, instead of gun reform, it's thoughts and prayers, T's and P's. And I think that diversity and inclusion programs often they're not strong enough on what problem are we trying to solve? And I think they're trying to solve a problem around like understanding differences, appreciating differences, maybe dipping the toe into understanding, our biases, and that, if we understand those biases, maybe we won't, bring them into work situations. But they're not looking at, dismantling unequitable systems, and they're not going to change the, complexion of the corporation. Can I just share a quick anecdote about my workplace? So, the recent killings of Black people that have, sparked this perhaps, racial Me Too moment they're not new. And there was, a spate of them several years ago. And at that time, I contacted the diversity inclusion area of Wells Fargo. And I said, I really think we need to be having conversations about white privilege and what white supremacy is and what it means to either resist that structure and at least understand our place in it. And so I recommended that we bring in Robin DiAngelo, who wrote this book, White Fragility. And I was told that Wells Fargo, talking about whiteness was not in line with Wells Fargo's diversity and inclusion strategy, and that we were not ready as an organization to have those conversations. And then the Charlottesville massacre happened, and I contacted them again, and I'm like, are we ready now? Like, what do we need to do to get ready? And I have contacted, and I never heard back. And I've contacted them again. Now, it's sort of just like a challenge for me. And I'm still, waiting to hear. I've heard back from one person who said that it was too expensive to bring her in, and I know that it's not. So, why the resistance to having real conversations within our organizations where we spend most of our time? I think there have been some really amazing statements that have been put out, particularly Ben & Jerry's statement, which was titled, "We Must Dismantle White Supremacy." And, that's saying it very straight. But, statements are not enough. And we need organizations to, help us catalyze courageous transformation.
Yeah, courageous transformation. Wow. So in line with organizations, Robin, we have a poll question that we want to send out to the participants today that says, my company addressed in words and actions the Black Lives Matter protest. So not at all, words but not actions, actions but not words, and words and actions. And you just shared a very, a very clear example there. And why people are answering that. Let's answer this question, Robin. What makes an organization ready to have these tough conversations, in your opinion? I mean, you're an executive in a major organization. What makes an organization ready?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I'm totally ready. So I don't know what other people need to do to get ready. I have been a participant in and a leader in having courageous conversations over the past month. That is definitely happening. So, being able to really share how this is affecting all of us, because racism affects white people too, and hear from our Black and Brown colleagues the experiences that they've had, and this is really important, that they don't feel safe at work, or they don't bring a big part of their experience and identity to work. And I've heard that over and over again in the past month, where Black and Brown people are saying, this is the first time I've felt like I can talk about racism at work. So it's really incumbent upon leaders to have those conversations and make the spaces, and to be clear on what are our priorities in design. You can't do everything. You have to prioritize. You have to focus. And right now, we need to focus on Black lives. And having the conversation be that specific, I think, is part of the racial reckoning that this country has never had and needs to have.
Thank you for sharing that. That's powerful. So let's talk about that poll. My company addressed in words. So 46% words but not actions. 38% words and actions, not at all. 10% actions, but so a lot of words but not actions. And I think that's something though we have faced for a long time in this space, right, Robin? Like, we have these great conversations, but then leaders aren't willing. And for those of you that downloaded the one pager, we built the iceberg, right? So the cold hard truth around the explicit and visible, but it's all the implicit and invisible things, like you just talked about, the discrimination, the systems and institutes, the hierarchies, the biases and unconscious beliefs, neutrality and denial, right? So we can put out those big statements, but then do nothing about it, right? And tie words to it. So I want to dive into what is the responsibility of design when it comes to these issues. And let's even get more specific, because solving for the right problem, you just said it, Robin. So let's word it this way. What is the responsibility of design when it comes to Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Are we thinking about like design the process or design the profession?
Ooh, let's go with design the process, right?
That's maybe, yeah, easier. I mean, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but again, I think it's about being intentional about how did this situation come to be. And I've heard a lot of white people who are feeling upset and wondering how they can change the system, having to admit to themselves that they didn't really understand what was going on, you know, and I have a hard time understanding that perspective because it's, to me, so obvious. But, you know, going back to Steve Jobs' quote, it's not what the thing is, it's how it works. And so, you know, understanding that the systems are designed, I think is a meaningful first step. And then, you know, if you don't like then what the thing is, then how are you going to do your part to design new systems? What are you as an individual, what actions are you going to take so that you feel that you're living a intentional, coherent, interconnected, meaningful life?
Yeah. So I thought we may not have to talk about the profession piece, Robin, but had a couple people actually say, can you,
Profession.
can you actually talk about the responsibility of design to the profession now?
Yeah. So my, the predecessor of my position, Mark McCormick, he's on the phone and, or on the Zoom, he realized that within the design group that he was running at the time, and now I'm leading, that we bring in a lot of contractors. And often that's the way people, you know, end up being full-time employees on the team. But we were not challenging our staffing vendors to bringing us a diverse pipeline of candidates. So just by the way that, you know, hiring was designed in the group of like, we bring in a contractor, we see if it's a good fit, the work is good, and then maybe we'll convert you to full-time employee. That system was not designed to create diversity within the team. And so he challenged our staffing vendors to change that. And there were some very interesting reactions. One staffing firm said, you know, no, our value add is to whittle down the candidates and just give you the best ones, not to give you a diverse pipeline. Another staffing agency, you know, that was like, they're saving us time is basically what the value of there. Another staffing agency actually hired a person to focus directly on, you know, expanding the diversity of candidates that they brought to the table. So two very different meaningful acts based on the problem set. So, you know, I think hiring is definitely important. I think culture is really important too. So, you know, are people represented, but then, you know, are they able to bring them their selves to work? And again, Mark established in the team, and it lives on today, that there's a diversity and inclusion section of every team meeting that we have. It's a blocked off, you know, permanent part of the agenda, 15 minutes, our D&I topic. People sign up for talking about, you know, whatever they want to talk about, and the topics are broad. And that is, you know, a part of the fabric of the culture.
Wow. Which is probably starts to, you know, how might someone who's not a leader in any organization create space for crucial conversations on race? I love just how you as a design team have just said, we're going to talk about this for 15 minutes every meeting. We're blocking this off. You know, one of the things we've done within our ecosystem of we've started having these real conversations, which is a 50-minute meeting to just talk about what's happening, right? And it's open, honest, it's a safe space for people to be able to ask questions and talk about things. So I want to turn this personally, knowing that we're coming close to the end. And again, I said we could probably go on, and who knows, we may do a part 2 of this too. So a poll question that we have for the group is, I have personally identified or taken action in direct response to racial injustice. So not interested, no, but I want to get started. Some, but not enough. And yes, I am doing all I can. And so while people are answering that one, Robin, I want to talk to you and ask you this question. So how do you identify when something is a bias or when it's an ideal design feature? Even after completing deeply empathetic learning as a designer, you will always be a gatekeeper. So,
Yeah. Is that coming in from the chat?
yes, yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you identify when something's a bias or when it's really an ideal design feature as a designer, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's anything, any such thing as ideal. I think, you need to be getting input throughout the process, and probably, as a profession, definitely we could do a better job of making sure that the people that we're getting that feedback from are representing diverse voices, and that we're asking explicit questions around like, I don't know exactly how I would say it, but does this really work for you given who you are, right? I wanted to mention my friend Rosella Kennedy, because she has a Kickstarter that's coming out today, and it's called Brave Sis, and I think it'll get put into the chat. And what she has designed is a personal day planner that centers women of color. And it's a planner without the pressure. And all, it can be used by anyone. It's primarily for women, and it centers women of color. But she noticed that she was looking for a planner for herself, and nothing really spoke to her. And it didn't feel nurturing. It didn't feel inspirational. And so she designed this beautiful day planner that, didn't exist in the world. So I think, having designers from diverse backgrounds will encourage those types of innovations. And then making sure, that we are also including diverse perspectives when we go out and seek feedback on those designs.
Awesome. And yes, we did get it out there in the chat. And Rosie said, thank you.
Go to the Kickstarter. Yeah.
Yes, so we will be going out there, Rosie. And just Rosie and Robin, make sure that you connect Rosie with me and our whole The Pink Couch movement, which is our female, hard conversations part. Would love to get Rosie a part of that. And I'm going to be really aware of time. So two things or three things I'm going to try to get us through here really fast. First off, Robin, we have a lot of people asking for part 2 to this. If you're up for it, I'm up for it, and we'll get that scheduled here.
What did people say in the poll?
Oh, I forgot. Yes. Thank you. So I personally identified or taken action in direct response. Some, but not enough. 60%. No, but I want to get started. 13, no, I am 24, and not interested, 3%. So we're at an 84%, which is awesome, which actually leads to the second page of the one-pager. And so I think this would be a great thing to send this group into. So if you haven't downloaded the one-pager, go download it, get to the second page. But we took that very first quote that Robin gave us, that design is a conscious planning and meaningful acts that create our relationships to ourselves and each other. And we put a little exercise together that says, based on what we've discussed, Robin and I, during this event, what are 3 meaningful action steps you can take within one or more of the areas of influence noted above? And so we have these areas of influence: family and friends, work, social groups, community, state, and national. So what are 3 action steps, meaningful action steps you can take. List your action steps below and share them with us on social media using the hashtag Disruptor Connection. So we're going to go out, start looking at that hashtag. This is where you can take this personal action we just were talking about, you know, that 84% either want to do more or have done. Go identify 3 areas that we can link to, that you can link to personally in these groups. We will find and get another one of these scheduled with Robin. It will not be the next one, but the next one is just as important and is going to be just as powerful. And I actually have behind me a bottle of this whiskey. And it's Burning Whiskey, and Allison Park is a female entrepreneur who has gone from bar to bar. You'll see that it's B-A-R-R-E to B-A-R. Gut, Grit, Fire, and Disruption with Allison Park. So she was a professional ballerina who actually turned into a distiller. So this is the only single malt whiskey distilled in France. We will be doing this for our July 4th edition, and she's actually going to give us some cocktail recipes in that. But she has just as powerful of a story around what it's been like to be a female entrepreneur in a very male-dominated industry. Very male-dominated industry. The link is in the chat. You can register for that now. And then I'll work with Robin after this to get part 2, because we've got tons of questions, tons of chat happening. Robin, thank you for your personal story, for going on this journey with us. At the end, you're going to be asked to fill out a quick survey. We really want your feedback. We really want to know what's happening. And if this is really speaking to you. But Robin, thank you so much for doing this. You're a very dear friend. And
thank you.
This courageous conversation is powerful, and I hope we can have more around this. So send our love to you. Stay safe, be well, and hopefully we can be together soon. So thanks, Robin.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.